Hey YouTube, and welcome to the MCs Unscripted, where we talk to artists, entertainers, and behind-the-scenes decision makers who are some of the best at what they do. So today we have something a little special for you guys. So for a long time now, you may have noticed that we've been focusing on music and wellness. You may have seen on one of our previous videos by Bryant Larson, he talks about music and the curing of Alzheimer's disease, fibromyalgia, and cancer. And obviously, so we are musicians and educators on the channel. So today we wanted to talk to a panel of professionals to ask you guys, did we get it right or not? So first we have winner of the Brains 500 Global Award, author of Building Confidence for Kids, Taking Care of Me, and My Gratitude Journal, also a certified youth mindset coach, Ikeda Alston.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Next we have Dr. Edwin Tulloch-Reaid, a renowned cardiologist, and who's also a fellow of the American College of Cardiology and on the Medical Council of Jamaica. Hi.
Well, sort of, I guess I'm bridging both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Next we have his beautiful wife, Katrine Tulloch-Reaid, Chief of Health and Wellness Learning, and one of the founders of My Heart Wellness.
Thank you. Hi.
Awesome. So, before we get into watching the video with you guys, can we start with Ikeda? Can you tell us a bit about being the owner and founder of Kima Kids Life Coach and what that's all about?
Yes. Well, when I first started my journey as a coach, I started off being a youth life coach, and I wanted to go that route because in my parenting journey, I do have two kids, 11 and 14. I've seen a lot of things in them that I really wanted to embrace and to encourage and motivate. And, thinking back to my own childhood, I did not have the best childhood, and I did not want my kids to have the same experience, the same negative experience that I had with low self-esteem, low self-worth, lack of confidence, and things like that. So when I decided to go into to youth life coaching, the philosophy that I wanted to bring about during that time was be who you needed when you were young. So I felt like if I had someone like me when I was younger, maybe I would not have had the negative experiences that I had when I was a kid. And so, 2 years into that, I've decided that, okay, well, in order to, I put it in the analogy of a plant. In order for a plant to grow, the surrounding area, the environment has to be, nourishing and fulfilling too. And so I equate that the soil and the environment to the household. And in order for that household to grow, full and lush and all that, I feel like the whole family needs to be involved in that. And that's why I also became a family coach.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
So next, Katrine and Dr. Edwin, can you guys tell us about myheartwellness.com and what you guys do?
What we do in a nutshell, we teach people how to change their lifestyle and reduce their risk for heart attacks and stroke. And we do that through an online program. I'm actually a cardiologist, and as you said, I trained in the US, and I was actually on the sort of interventional side of cardiology, unplugging arteries, putting in stents. But you can have a lot greater impact if you teach lifestyle change. 80% of heart disease is preventable, and we know how to do it. But actually, we know what to do, but it's not so easy to get going with doing it and to make those lifestyle changes stick. So we developed this program. Most of it happens in the mind. And Katrine's an expert on mindset change. She can tell you the rest.
Yes, so what I experienced was that it's all well and good for a patient to sit in their doctor's office and they receive the instruction, do this, do that, eat well, eat more vegetables, cut down the salt, get more exercise. And then the patient leaves and is very unsupported on making those changes. And as we all know, the way that we've been living our life is what we're accustomed to. And so in talking, how could we not only focus on the prevention of heart disease and stroke and heart attacks, but what did we need to be able to offer to someone to really help them along that journey? And this is where we came to sort of designing the programs. This is my area of expertise, is designing the programs so that it's not only what somebody learns, but it is also then that they have the tools, they have the skills in order to make those changes in their life. And very importantly, that those changes can stick, because that also is where the benefit comes. It's, the little point in doing a great physical activity exercise regime for a week, and then it stops, right? And so it's how do we incorporate change into someone's lifestyle in a way that is not stressful, is very doable, is very manageable, and in a way then that, the person can continue with, and it becomes a new way of living in life.
Yes, it's a journey, and we support them on their journey. We provide the support they need to enjoy the heart health they deserve.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I am honored to have you guys on the show, really. So now why don't we get into the video?
Meet Diobeth, or Dio for short. He's your perfectly normal, happy, healthy 15-year-old boy who finds every reason to hang out with his friends, does his chores, but football, that's his thing. You can ask him anything about the Seattle Seahawks. Let's go 12 man! And he could tell you anything about them, from who's on the bench to the roster to the salaries, anything. At least he could at the time of this picture. You see, 2 years ago, Dio went from being able to go to football practice strong and healthy 5 days a week, a game every single Friday, to losing the ability to even open his hands, practically overnight. And that was just the beginning of it. Days pass, and Dio and his parents realize that something is terribly wrong. It's more than just a lingering football injury, and they go to the Children's Hospital Los Angeles to discover what is actually going on. Our friend Dio has a mass sitting on his brain that is affecting his motor skills and maybe more. Even though the doctors were able to perform a successful surgery within 3 days of his diagnosis, during his recovery, his body began to act unexpectedly. Besides the pain he started to feel, his blood pressure spiked along with his heart rate. Dio had a stroke. And now what started out as a successful surgery, promising help, ended up being a complete loss of his ability to communicate. Not to mention the loss of nearly all motor function, confining the once football player to a wheelchair. So what happens next, YouTube, is the reason why we're here. You see, Dio taught himself how to play the guitar and the piano well before all of this ever happened. He could play all of his favorite songs, and it was something that he loved to do. So once Blake, his rehab specialist, learned that singing and music were areas of strength for her young patient, she began incorporating music into their sessions daily. Dio, now affectionately known as the Ed Sheeran of Children's Healthcare Los Angeles, showed amazing progress. How did this happen?
So I'm pausing it right now to ask the question, do you think that learning can be a form of preventative care for diseases such as Alzheimer's or other such cognitive diseases?
Well, actually, that would have to be something sort of looking back into the past. To do that kind of study retrospectively couldn't be what we call a prospective trial, which is generally carries more weight in terms of evidence. So it's hard to say, but it has been theorized that people who are exposed to music, and I guess more than just listening to it, but because there's nobody who's music naive, music is all around us, but it's more maybe participating by learning an instrument or being involved in maybe in dances related to music, that their cognitive function tend to maintain their cognitive function, and these seem to be less susceptible to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's later in life. So it may have a legacy effect, long-term effect, but it's really hard to tease out because there's so many factors involved in one's brain health, so to speak.
Okay. And Ikeda, do you have anything to say about maybe the therapeutic side of music for recovering emotionally, on the emotional side of things?
I guess with all of the things that you guys have said, I believe that those are some really valid points. And I also know that in my research of emotional intelligence and emotional wellness, music does play a part of developing the neural pathways and, connecting all the synapses in the brain are firing whenever we're exposed to music. So I think that when you think about it on that aspect, it creates a calm body, a calm mind, and a calm spirit. And our bodies respond to stress. And when our bodies are in stress, it's hard for it to heal. So when there's something that is calming our bodies down, like music, I think it can be a huge factor in helping our bodies to heal on that side, on the opposite side of the clinical part of it. So yeah, I definitely agree.
So I think one of the things that I find very fascinating about the effect of music, and this particularly is found in those that have been learning to play music over a long time, is the way that it strengthens the connection between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. And we know certainly also from some of the studies from sort of the aftermath, for example, of something like a stroke, where there may be impairment, for example, in a certain part of the brain, but how the brain, now we know that the brain is incredibly,
Plastic.
So that it has this ability to recruit function from other parts of the brain. And it seems that this could be in part where the connections between both sides of the brain might facilitate, if the damage is on the left side, is that perhaps some of the function can be co-opted, as it were, from the right side of the brain. Mm-hmm. But it seems that this connectivity that is facilitated, and we know from the imaging just how much of an impact prolonged learning of music makes those connections so strong. I think that is also it's early days. And the imaging is also developing. And so we can see so much more now of what's actually happening in the brain to understand some of the mechanisms, or at least to hypothesize it of an explanation.
Okay, yeah, and actually, from when I was taking piano lessons from a young age, I heard, my piano teacher said that piano was the, I don't know if it was the hardest instrument to learn, but you use both sides of the brain because you're using both of your hands doing different things at the same time. And so I always thought that was so interesting. And whenever I told anybody I played piano, I was like, yeah, it makes you smarter.
Better at math? Not sure. Okay.
Yeah, there is actually math in music theory. So I did pretty well at that atonal math, but that uses numbers, things like that. So yeah. We'll go, does anybody else have anything to add, or we'll go back to the video? Okay.
What role did music play in any of this? Many patients with aphasia can sing more than they can speak. That's because music is one of the few things that crosses both hemispheres of the brain, helping to create new neural pathways for language. As a matter of fact, later in this video, we're going to explore experiments that prove that music and sound frequencies can have a physical effect on the body on a cellular level. So it's no surprise that an entire industry is being built on the foundation of a single question. What else can music and sound itself cure in the human body? Hey, my name's Bryant. Welcome to the MC's Music at the Core Everything. Today, I'm your host, and we are asking the question in this video, can music cure cancer? The answer is Nah, music cannot cure cancer. It just can't. Nobody has a cure to cancer, right? Let's come back to that. What about heart failure, fibromyalgia, Alzheimer's disease? For those families affected by Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here because I wanted to ask a question before we get all into the Alzheimer's disease. I want to ask, so can music help prevent or recover from heart failure? Dr. Edwin, what do you think about that?
Well, there seems to be evidence that there's benefit, but as he said, there's a difference between healing and a cure, and healing may involve a lot of quality of life improvements. So people have a better acceptance of their disease and what's wrong with them, and they actually feel better. They're more able to do their normal activities, the activities of daily living. So in that sense, there's a quality of life improvement, and there seems to be demonstrated benefit in heart failure and music. But it's very individual, because there are generally certain frequencies which are better for entraining the heart or synchronizing the heart. So it might depend on the kind of music, the tempo, and people also differ in terms of it's a very subjective experience how people relate to particular music. So what might be music that somebody likes, another person they may not like it. So it probably is a very individual thing. But there seems to be benefits. Now, there are risk factors that lead to conditions like heart attack, stroke, and heart failure. And we know a lot of them, like hypertension. And music has actually been demonstrated, maybe listening to music about half an hour a day to reduce blood pressure, to reduce heart rate. The heart, there's the heart is controlled by the nervous system. And there's a sort of a yin and a yang, a sympathetic, a fight-flight response, and a rest and digest response. And music seems to alter the balance in favor of the rest and digest, the slower heart rate, the calming effect, and that has benefits for the heart. Even with people who already have disease, already have heart failure, who've already had a heart attack or a stroke, there are benefits for them for the long term. But it's not the cure, as I say. It can't restore you fully, but it might improve your quality of life. It may not even necessarily lengthen your life or improve survival, but there seems to be quality of life benefits for music and in the cardiovascular system and in cardiovascular disease.
Okay.
Maybe there may be some survival advantage if you listen to music, one listens to music consistently, because of the benefit it seems to show with anxiety and depression and actually mood in general. So, those have prognostic impact, as we say in cardiology. So music can help you that way, and it's your kind of music you like, music maybe that you can dance to. It facilitates becoming more physically active, reduces stress, music that allows you to sleep better. And these are all major pillars of heart health. So it would seem, at least on theoretical grounds, that music will benefit people who suffer from these conditions, and may even, because of these important risk factors, help prevent a lot of these conditions. That's where we're all about at My Heart Wellness, preventing. And then preventing doesn't mean that you prevent someone from getting the condition, but you can have something called secondary prevention, prevent complications of the condition, or tertiary prevention. So heart failure is a progressive illness that people tend to get worse and worse until they die. If you can prevent that progression, that's very helpful in terms of people's outlook. It's someone who's suffering from heart failure in terms of and maybe 1 million people in the United States at this moment actually live with heart failure. So it's very real, it's very common, and anything that will help them enjoy a better quality of life and live longer is beneficial. Music and any other mindfulness practice, we would recommend and support.
Awesome. Ikeda, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes. One of the things that you said earlier, Edwin, made me think about about my dad's situation. You said that it's subjective as far as how you are when you accept the diagnosis of your disease. And you said it's subjective, and it's based on yourself, and it's also based on your surrounding areas. So it kind of led me to ask the question of like, I wonder how does like age and gender and like people's cultural background, how does that impact the health benefits of music?
But as you mentioned, music is very different. And, one person's music, one man's meat, another man's poison, one's rock music. But generally, we found interesting, there's a study in West Africa, in Nigeria, where they looked at blood pressure lowering and heart rate lowering in a particular province in Nigeria. And they compared different types of music and within their cultural context. R&B music and reggae were the most effective at lowering heart rate and lowering blood pressure. So, as you said, we have to understand the background culture, whether it's maybe more of an African culture, they may respond more to music, maybe it's generalizable, I don't know, but a slower tempo and a higher frequency. And that, it's believed, also helps with things like eating choices. So we talk about healthful living as one of our pillars of health, but eating choices you make better eating choices if you listen to slower tempo, higher frequency music compared to sort of the opposite, faster tempo, lower frequency music. So music has a tremendous power to influence how people think, how people react, how people behave, and change their whole mindset. And therefore, even with disease or even with living disease, it can completely change your outlook. I think it's a very powerful thing.
Like I'll speak about my dad. He did pass away about 4 years ago due to pancreatic cancer. But the way that he accepted the diagnosis of his disease, it wasn't very positive. And I wondered if the progression, like the way that his progression got worse so quickly, was because of his acceptance of it. And if there was, if there was a way to slow that progression, like if he was in a better overall emotional, his emotional health was more positive, or maybe he had listened to music, would it had, maybe slowed down the progression of the disease? Or, it just leads me to ask all of these questions now, because it's so like, it's really phenomenal how music can affect people's minds and bodies so differently. So yeah, I wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was amazing what you said, Edwin, earlier about it. The acceptance of the disease could possibly slow down the progression of it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
So I'm very sorry to hear about that, but it really, pancreatic cancer is not a nice thing. Well, we know from cultures in Africa and in the Native American culture, music is very much a part of healing. And as I mentioned, we're talking more not so much about cure, but about healing. And part of healing is acceptance. And sometimes recognizing that one will not necessarily get better, but there are things one can enjoy while one is alive, and being able to relate to family members and being there. So you can the positive aspects. There's also an issue of what we call a sick role, that people assume a role which is sort of marred in depression and anxiety and helplessness. And if music is felt to actually help people relinquish that role and be able to function better emotionally and maybe even physically and in other ways too, because of this calming, healing effect it has.
And we also know the reverse is true, that music which is either very loud, it's music that maybe grates on us, or music which has where the beat is very, very persistent and insistent, and it's faster than our own heart rates. We get entrained to that. The body can experience that as a very real stress. And so again, you have to think about, when we talk about music, it is that very broad spectrum. Maybe a question that we should ask is, what are we talking about music? Is it music that's just man-made, What about like the music of nature? You know, we're admiring Ikeda's beautiful background, and I'm sure we can all experience that. We can kind of exhale just looking at the serenity of the plants and the trees. There's also a sonic landscape when we step outside and we open our windows and we go on our balcony, and what are those sounds, and what are our associations, and what are those frequencies, and what is the rhythm that's established there? So think of, you know, the developing fetus in a womb, and what is the sound that is constant? It's
the reggae beat.
And so, you know, it's when we hear that kind of rhythm, is it that we are recalling at our most fundamental, you know, deep in the recesses of our, you know, primeval brain, a safe space. So, you know, you can think of what we're reacting to, and it's part of it can be frequency, as the study that's cited. Part of it can be just the regularity, you know, because again, we know that we find it more less stressful if there is a predictability and there is a rhythm that's understandable. So changes to that can also make us feel stressed. And so we think that the power of music is at a very deep instinctual, that it really is something that we react to, rather, and then we process it afterwards. You know, we think, oh, that's a beautiful melody, or you know, I was moved to tears by those lyrics, or you know, I just wanted to get up and dance. But those are the things that we think about after. But our initial reaction is so fast to music that it is before the brain, the cognitive parts of the brain can catch up.
Wow, that I learned so much just now.
So did I.
It made me think of this video that I did previously on the channel about opera music versus metal music, and you know, which one's better. And I was just thinking, you know, I feel like opera music would just be much better for somebody's well-being. The metal music, I don't think so. It would make sometimes when I listen to it, no offense to the metal lovers out there, but it just makes me a little bit anxious, a little bit stressed. Absolutely. For some reason.
Well, there's a very interesting study that looked at, first they studied in a male population, and then they did the same study repeated in a female population, and they looked at the effect of heavy metal music versus it was one of the classical composers, but I don't remember which one. Mm-hmm. And they did find that in both men and in women, that there was a heightened activation of the sympathetic nervous system with the heavy metal music. So that what you've experienced is a bit of anxiety or is actually, there are studies that will show that the type of music does impact, which is not necessarily related to your preference. Right, you may love heavy metal music, but it's still going to have more of an excitatory effect on the body than other types of music.
Well, let's get back to the video.
For those families affected by Alzheimer's disease, it is simply one of the most devastating diagnoses that you can receive. One that carries with it a crippling toll on the patient as well as the families of the patient. It's another one of those diseases with no known cure or even a medicine to help mitigate the significant effects that this disease carries on the brain. So when Dr. Lee Bartel expanded his research of sound on the brain and body to include the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, you can imagine the implications. You see, Dr. Lee Bartel used a principle called entrainment, which is a process whereby two interacting oscillating systems tend to fall into synchrony. When he realized that the brain uses 40 hertz to communicate between both hemispheres, he reasoned that he could use that same frequency outside of the body to facilitate communication inside of the brain. And it freaking worked. Writing and using music that contained a lot of this 40 hertz frequency, basically a low E, he began to see significant progress in patients ranging from fibromyalgia to blood flow irregularities. Soon, our doctor just started to use the simple frequency itself, playing over speakers mounted in reclining style medical chairs, and prescribed 30 minutes at a time. Well, it turns out the well-known knowledge that music helped facilitate motor and speech recovery was just the beginning of the true power of music and health over all sorts of diseases. Look, I know what you're thinking. And yes, we are talking about peer-reviewed, academic, scientific documentation, not just a guy claiming that he can heal people with musical chairs. The medical benefits of music therapy are vast. We know this. But when Dr. Bartel used his revolutionary 40 hertz frequency to help many Alzheimer's patients, the medical field had no choice but to take it seriously. The patient began to remember more, and in rapid time actually began to slow in their symptoms for extraordinary amounts of time. Take a look at this study published in the National Library of Medicine. What you are looking at is the first systematic review focusing on randomized trials of patients with Alzheimer's disease, and the results are amazing. We are talking about literally slowing the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease in patients, not in the future, but now. Studies have shown that music, both listening and playing, introduced early enough in life, help to prevent dementia and other cognitive diseases altogether. There it is.
Okay. So, any thoughts on that? On like, is he right? Does it prevent more than that? Or even like on the emotional side of things? What do you guys think about that?
I feel like it's amazing. I mean, it just goes back to what we were saying before, as far as it changes your mindset and changes your mood, and it brings you to a more relaxed state, and you're able to. I thought it was pretty amazing that he said that patients were able to remember more, and according to a certain rhythm. And that's fascinating. That is really, really fascinating.
Katrine, Dr. Edwin, anything?
Another thing that I would like to add that maybe we haven't touched upon is music is very often a communal experience. And when we talk about illness, and particularly something that is progressive, that takes away, parts of memory, parts of connecting, we think that so music can have such an important social role because it allows family members to connect with a person who is suffering from Alzheimer's, again, in a way that the loss is not the primal point of relationship. Now you're connecting with maybe the memory of what that music takes both on all parties to, with a person, let's say I'm the family member of someone who has Alzheimer's, and I'm witnessing and I'm experiencing the loss of, the person as I knew them. And all of a sudden we have a means of connecting outside of that. And it takes us both to what was, but it brings the what was into the present moment. And I think, again, that's something very, very powerful about music, is that it is very transportive. I don't know if that's a word, but it can bring us to a place. It can kind of take us out of the present moment and pull us away, but it can also really anchor us in the present moment with someone else. And I think that element of connection, I think music is again, it's one of these really primal experiences that we share with others.
Music seems to be something one tends to retain. One of the appreciation of music is something that's retained for a long time. So it provides a vehicle for communication and connection when everything else has started to fail. So it is probably maybe very unique as a therapeutic tool, and we just haven't explored its potential enough. We're just learning. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I do actually, now that I'm thinking about it, have an anecdote of my own. So I had a couple of piano teachers growing up as a kid, and one of them is kind of how I got into opera. So I started off with piano, and her husband was a doctor, but he was very much into music, into opera, and he would host these kind of opera nights at their house and invite some of the piano students to come, and we're all like young, middle school, teenager kids, and we're like, opera? Okay. You have food? Okay. So we would come over to the house and we'd listen to it, and we're like, what are they saying? But then after all of this, we would actually go to the movie theaters and see the opera together, because they stream operas live from the Metropolitan Opera at certain movie theaters. And so that's kind of how I myself got into opera. And so, later on, I'm already have gone to school for singing and everything. And I heard that my piano teacher's husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so at one point I went over to their house, and she had asked me to come over and, hang out with him for a bit and listen to some operas, watch an opera or something. And so I came over, and this is my first time, seeing him since he's been diagnosed, and he was, further along at this point. And so I walk into the house, and I hear he's over at the piano just playing some amazing piece. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then, he walks up and say, oh, hi, how are you doing? And he didn't recognize me, and he didn't know who I was. And I was just, wow, like really shocked and taken aback. It was my first experience with something like that. And so my piano teacher, introduced us, and we sat down and had our glass of wine and had our snacks like we usually do, and we sat down and watched an opera. And of course, we were going through, oh, what opera do you want to watch? And he knew all of them. He could remember all of that stuff, and he's like, oh, that's a good one. And it was just very interesting how I'm like, wow, I felt like this was something that we really shared together. Like my love for opera kind of grew from him. Mm-hmm. And then he didn't remember who I was, but we still had that connection like through the music, through opera together. So that, was really interesting to me.
And it probably helped you to feel connected to him. Mm-hmm. Because if you hadn't had that bridge into the bond that you used to have, but which still existed kind of like underneath, but not recognizing you, if you hadn't had that and you had just been left with he doesn't recognize me, you might have had a real sense of loss. Whereas the music was like a vehicle that could allow you kind of like to move through that into how to connect with each other and how you could connect. And I think that often is a real challenge for those of us who are supporting someone, or in your case, visiting someone, because kind of like our cognitive mind is almost like we feel rejected because we're no longer recognized. Or why does the person not remember me? I thought I was more important. Why is it that they remember, I don't know, like where the plate is in the kitchen cupboard and they don't remember who I am? And so sometimes it can also help us like overcome those very natural emotions and reconnect with kind of like more of the essence of what our relationship is.
Okay, I will go back to the video.
Doctors and scientists have unanimously agreed that music prevents and cures all sorts of diseases. But here is where I have a problem with it. That statement is not true at all. If you noticed, none of the studies previously mentioned ever used the word cure. You know why? For one, the question of does music cure this or that is the summary of a myopic and flawed view of medicine itself. Remember what I just told you. Music has been shown to have preventative effects on cognitive diseases. Well then, why would it still be an elective from which there are many to choose and or throw away? Or, like we're seeing now in counties and districts all over America, music and the arts are being completely taken out to boost STEM subjects. And sometimes it's just because the people in charge don't think that it's important enough to fund.
So I do have a question. I feel like Dr. Edwin kind of hinted at before, but so Bryant just mentioned about music being an elective kind of option at school for kids. Do you guys think that music should be mandatory in schools as a form of, I don't know, preventative care?
I think so. I for one think so, because looking at the state of our kids today, it's like they're so filled with so much anxiety, so much pressure, so much stress. They're dealing with so much that their little bodies can even handle. And a lot of the kids that I've seen and that I've dealt with, they don't really have an outlet. They have screen time. They have, just a lot of them don't even have people to talk to. All they have is screens, right? So having something like this, like music, like some sort of music activity, even if it's for a few minutes a day, whether in school or outside of school, just I feel like it should be mandatory in school. It was mandatory when I was when I was in school, in elementary and middle school. It was mandatory, and I feel like, especially now, post-pandemic, all of the things that's going on in our world today, it should be something that is integrated in our schools. A lot of these arts, it seems like they're taking all of these arts away. And as you can see, there's so many mental illness that are coming out now. And it's starting with our kids. And it's such a sad state. It's a really sad state.
I totally agree. I think it should be mandatory because it's such an important role, and it seems to have a legacy effect. So the benefit lasts even if you subsequently drop music or drop you haven't maintained maybe a lifelong interest in music. So, but you're not participating actively anymore. But it seems to have enduring benefit for emotional, physical, and psychological health and well-being. So I said there are so many stressors, and if you're exposed to this level of stress young, it does have consequences for cardiovascular health later on in life. So I would definitely agree that something like music should not be, not that I'm in favor of STEM, yes, but STEM subjects, but I think that there is definitely a place for something like music and probably other art forms to develop the whole person.
And I would totally agree. I probably have one caveat though, and that is that I think that there should be more spaces for experimentation and exploration, and that it's not just, that this is yet another area to compete and excel, and this is right. And if you're first violinist, you're clearly much better than the person in orchestra who plays a triangle, or that the recorder is, for those who can't do anything else. I think that we need more spaces in the school system that allow a child to play more and to see what's pleasing to them. And like, you said, Julia, that you had the perception, opera, what is it? Or that's not for me. I mean, we have so many ways that people feel excluded. Whatever it is, we hear that in Jamaica, sometimes a child who's interested in classical music is a little bit like a pariah culturally. You should be only interested in the music of your country or your culture. And I think that is a shame. I think that again is you narrow the world down too much. I think music, we find it all over the world, and think, how many different types of musical expression there are. Why can't music be a way into understanding a different culture? Understanding, why is it that understanding history and understanding movement of people and of ideas. And, I think, again, we separate the school system into the arts and into the sciences, and we break it further down into the STEMs and the non-STEM subjects. And we can make something like music so much more than it just being an arts subject, and we have to kind of balance a curriculum to give a little bit of, a token into the arts. It can be it's so rich. I mean, we're just discussing about how it impacts our motor neuron skills and our memory, and it activates language and emotion. So let's make sure that the music education can also reflect that.
And I really, really love that. I actually took a world music class in college. And that was one of my favorite courses to take because I got to listen to music from all around the world, and, all the rules for that kind of music, like you just chuck all the rules that you learned about Western music out the window, and it's just a new set of things. And it was, it kind of affected me differently, the way that I heard that music. And some of the most interesting and beautiful music that I listened to in that class was from Azerbaijan. It's like Middle Eastern kind of music. It was so interesting. And I was like, man, I wish I could sing some of this. I wish I could actually participate in this kind of music. And a lot of people, don't get to hear the Indian music, Chinese, Asian music, because there's so many different kinds of techniques and rhythms and musical rules that are involved in that. That sort of affect you differently than when you hear regular Western music or European music. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's quite a bridge, and I think your tolerance and for other people who are different, it comes a lot from, if you listen to their music, you recognize that they're also human and they're not unlike you, provided you have a bit of an open mind. And I think that breaks down a lot of barriers.
Yeah. Wow. That was great. Okay, back to the video.
If we really believed that preventing Alzheimer's, dementia, fibromyalgia was something we could do, wouldn't we be doing it? No. I mean, the answer is no. That's because the idea of curing someone can only happen after the person has been afflicted. Chemotherapy is the leading way as of where we are now in medicine to quote unquote cure cancer. But in our emotionless and perfunctory definition of the word cure, we have prioritized the disease over the human. Chemo doesn't work every time, but its effects are universal. The sickness, hair loss, weakness, and fragility, some get through it. But after it reaches a certain stage, many don't. Understanding illness in terms of cure or no cure, binary and urgent in its implementation due to the nature of the word itself. We forget that there is another word, healing. Dio, now affectionately known as the Ed Sheeran of Children's Healthcare Los Angeles, showed amazing progress. It was like he was famous. Music helped him communicate so much better, but it also restored his confidence, something he lost after his stroke. By the end of his initial 6 weeks in inpatient speech and language therapy, Dio was not only more secure in himself, but he had made leaps in communicating. He was speaking more fluently and connecting several words and phrases together. To quote one of the medical staff, "We finally got to see the real Dio, the funny, social, and wonderful guy he is. He was communicating in conversations and telling jokes. It was incredible to witness. That's not a cure, that's healing. The body, the mind, and..."
Okay, so I know that I believe Ikeda mentioned something before, or Katrine, you asked Ikeda about if you can use music to kind of help communicate with kids and their emotional well-being. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit more about that and, ask, so can music be helped to help the communication between kids and their families, with their emotional health, emotional well-being, with their confidence, things like that, like what we just heard about Dio? What do you think about that, Ikeda?
I think that it's very possible. I mean, just hearing about how the music helped Dio to restore his confidence. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing. So if music can do that for a person, imagine if like the whole family is where the music is integrated into the whole family. There's a connection. Like it's a Edwin, you guys said before that it's like a vehicle that connects either from past to future, or from person to person, or from something known to or unknown to known. That same vehicle, it can, connect a family together, and it can create a closeness, a bond. I remember when my kids were small, when they were probably like, 5 or 6, we used to have these crazy dance parties. Like our connection with music was that we would turn the music up loud and just jump around and dance and just play. I mean, even though it may not have been the music that one person liked, the fact that we all had a great time just listening to all these different songs, like everybody got to choose their own type of music at one point in time. And it was just a time for us to be free and connect with each other and laugh and just, the feeling, like when I think back on it, the feeling it was just pure joy. And there was no pain. There were no negative feelings associated with it. It was just happiness and joy and connection. So I think that, like, just thinking back on that experience, bringing the family together, bringing a sense of connection in with the family, yeah, that can definitely create such a strong bond in families. And I can't believe I didn't think about that before, but yeah, it was an amazing time. And I loved it. It was just a time of just pure joy. So imagine that. It's just thinking back on it just makes me feel so emotional and happy. Yeah.
It actually reminds me, because I have a cousin who is a singer, stroke entertainer, and he, way back when in the summers in Long Island, we'd have like family gatherings, and all the cousins would gather for a sort of karaoke party, and that just a description transported me right back to those moments and those times. It's 30 plus years, but it's that strengthened the bond between us as family members, and an extended family, not just siblings, but cousins. Yeah, so that's nice. Thank you. I totally agree. Yeah.
So I had 2 things. So this is maybe a little bit more like on the science side of it. Mm-hmm. There's some very powerful work that we know from the area of music therapy in trauma, and where children or adults can't articulate what has gone on, or they don't have necessarily either the words themselves, or they don't have the understanding of the emotions, or the emotions are too big to talk about them. That we know that it's the same sort of with art therapy, that if you can find a medium through which they can express what's gone on, it is a part of that healing process. And so that, I think, again, is where music can play such an important role, because someone can maybe sing about, and whether it's a trauma, a very big trauma, or it is the fact that they just they felt left out at school because nobody selected them for a sports team, or because they were, they didn't get into the top, section of the class and certain results, but allowing a child, or when we become older, an adult, a different medium to communicate. And linked to that, we also know from the brain imaging that when that is done on a performer, there was a wonderful study that I read which was a performer, well-known performer, who was, really assessed for the activities of the brain that light up when he was playing one of the pieces that he knew very well, one of his own pieces. And then they reran that and he was asked to improvise. And what they found was that the prefrontal cortex, where we have the rational control and the sort of the thinking side, that there was decreased activity in that. And so it was also then how music not only activates some areas, but also where it can deactivate others. And then through that, there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of possibilities. And so again, sort of thinking about how that can be applied in someone's life. Sometimes when we're faced with a problem, whether Ikeda with her clients, with us, with our community, we kind of get frozen into thinking, well, I can't do this, or this is too difficult. And we shut out possibilities. And so again, maybe a role that we can think for music is that it reopens that world of possibilities for us. We have more courage to go into that unknown.
Wow, very interesting. I know when you mentioned improv, I feel like my stress levels go up whenever anybody asks me to improv because I'm not good at that.
But you probably, sing in the shower when you're by yourself and you don't feel judged by others. You don't feel you have to perform.
Very
and
true.
then you probably do improvise. And I'm pretty sure your heart rate doesn't jump up at that point.
Well,
that's true.
Slow tempo jazz is actually great for food choices. And, jazz is where improv is king. But it's a tremendous facilitator of music.
Yeah. The more we talk about it, the more we find all these amazing things about it.
Amazing. Okay, we'll go back to the video.
Yes, the spirit. And we're not talking about a religion here. We're talking about the thing that makes us human, the human spirit. Anita Collins tells us when you listen to music, multiple areas of your brain become engaged and active.
Found was that music sets off huge numbers of networks and parts of the brain all at the same time, but at a very low level. And they said, wow, this is incredible. We've never seen anything like this. So this began the field of neuromusical research.
Playing music over time actually makes you smarter. It's just science. And there's a consensus amongst doctors and scientists that's actually pretty well known. You want to know the effects of music on the immune system, pregnancy, real life examples of how it has saved lives? I put all those links in the description because literally, unless you want to sit here and watch a 4-hour-long video, I can't include all of the benefits and the research being done in this field in this video. What I will do is try to spark an amazing idea to anyone watching this. Alan Harvey reminds us that all the way up to the Middle Ages, music was taught alongside math, geometry, astronomy. He says if you asked Leonardo da Vinci if he was a scientist or an artist, he wouldn't even understand the question. They were seen as all a part of a single subject known as natural philosophy. And as we have begun to separate the sciences from music, we have neglected the fact that music evolved right alongside language and humans. It's not a separate entity that can be chosen or discarded based on how you feel that day. We see it being taken out of schools in the Western world. And the negative effects of this will be, and have been, far-reaching and quite frankly, detrimental to the child and the rest of society. So the amazing idea.
Okay, so I want to ask, so Ikeda, do you agree? Do you disagree with this? Have you seen this in your practice at all? Do you have, any recommendations about what Bryant just said?
I have not seen it in my practice. Not as much. So I'm not sure how to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
But with what he said, as far as the decline, like once the musical arts were taken out of school, like you can see a decline in emotional health and emotional wellness. And, just like how we were talking about before, I feel like it should be something that is made to be mandatory, not necessarily a competition, but definitely a regular part of our kids' lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know that when I was living in Atlanta, I mean, I was hearing of the music programs at some schools were just being cut. And my musician friends and I, we were just wondering, like, why is this happening? I mean, why is it the music program, like, music has such a profound effect on human beings, you know, as a whole. And I don't know, some people, like, it's so hard to get people to fund the arts for some reason. And yet, like, the arts are still sort of celebrated, and it's something that I think is a necessity to have in a culture to kind of keep us going. And I don't know, yeah, it kind of baffles me sometimes that some people just don't see music like that, or arts in general, you know.
And I would add to that it's not only that it is something that is good to do because of its developmental whatever, but the moment we wake up in the moment, from the moment we wake up in the moment to the moment we go to bed, we interact with the creative industry, the results of creativity in every single thing that we do. We draw curtains. I mean, the fabrics that's printed on the curtains are creative, as well as you've got the science and the business behind it. You know, the food that we consume, the packaging that it's in, the recipes, we've got, you know, the whole, you know, the arts of the food, we've got photography, we've got the moment that we have an alarm clock jingle or sound. I mean, what is that? It's someone who's being creative and has put that, you know, those frequencies together to give us whatever that sound is. We turn on the radio, it's, you know, we consume it. It's we get to the office or anywhere else. And I mean, what are we choosing for entertainment? What do we share with each other? It's the thing that we are most engaged with, I think, throughout our day. And to not put it on the same level as the science, you know, or the business or whatever it is, I think it does all of us an injustice, because we do need it. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree with that.
Well spoken as someone who used to work in the creative industry.
Absolutely. And I mean, the sad thing also is that, you know, a life without creativity is a life that none of us would want. Imagine you've got no music, you've got no dance, you've got none of the visual arts, of which there are so many. You've got no culinary arts. And so you think, well, that is a life which is really contracted and retracted and is not worth living for most of us. And yet, in terms of the people who get recompensed, it's certainly oftentimes it's not the creatives. So not only is it not given an equal place in the school curriculum, but then those that do pursue it oftentimes are the ones that are not benefiting from their creativity. So there is an imbalance, I think, that, you know, we need it, we celebrate it, we think of the movie stars and the music stars, and, you know, they're up on pedestals and we aspire to be like them, and young people want to be like them. And yet, you know, we're robbing their opportunity also to be able to develop those sides of themselves. I'm like you, I kind of think, well, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Oh, well, you're one of the few trained as a scientist, loving creativity, the creatives. Yeah, well, I think we talk about whole people and health, not just the absence of disease, but being whole and a state of complete well-being. So we need things like music in our lives to be healthy emotionally and psychologically, and the emotional benefit translates into physical health, and the emotional and psychological benefits, and the mental health benefits also translate to physical health. And as a cardiologist, I am definitely aware of, as Ikeda mentioned, the effect that stress has on both mental and physical health. You know, heart disease very often related to a lot of chronic stress. So it's you know, this whole person concept is very near and dear to my heart as well as a cardiologist.
Good. And for everybody who's listening, music is very important. You need it in your lives. You have it in your lives. It's integrated into everything in your daily lives. Just so you know, music is very important. In case anybody was wondering who's watching this video. Okay, so now we're going to just finish out the video and watch basically until the end at this point.
The idea is, let's bring back music as a science and not simply as an elective for those who seem more inclined to enjoy it. There was nothing in this whole video that said you ever had to be good at it. Just learning an instrument early and with purpose alone does the same thing for cognitive health, motor skills, social skills, the immune system, and even a deeper understanding of self in the student.
My own view is, and this might not be appreciated by a lot of music teachers, is actually the most important aspect is early on is social music making, not driving young kids to be a Yehudi Menuhin or whatever it might be, because that, my view is everyone is musical.
So no, music can't cure cancer, but studies have shown that music helps with the healing process of patients with cancer. Not only with the depression and anxiety, but with the actual healing of the body after chemo, surgery, and even in hospice care. Music is a part of being human, and we need it like we need air, community, movement, water. I think that's lost when we ask what it can or can't cure. We put more emphasis on curing the disease than healing the person. And interestingly enough, there's good reason for that. The people who have invented the life-saving vaccines and antibiotics that kill diseases that were once seen as incurable and deadly, they have used the cure approach, and it works. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure if my opinion is deeply flawed or correct. But I do know that there are people asking the same questions within the medical field. Music needs more experiments and needs to be put through the rigor of the scientific method before we can claim it cures anything. Its full context, from prevention to harm reduction to the maybe one day unlocking the secret communication of the mind, 40 hertz at a time. Can music cure cancer? That's not the question worth asking, in my opinion. The science and facts are there for that one. The real question is, how should we prioritize healing? Bones and blood cells? Or spirits and inner peace? Or is there even healing without both? That, I don't know. But do you? If you do, go ahead and leave your answer in the comment section below. Hit that subscribe button right now.
That was the end. What did you guys think? Did we get it right in the video? Any ending remarks?
Very interesting that sort of that music. I guess you should encourage people to get engaged with a musical activity when they're young because of all the protective benefits it has long term. Maybe if, they may help prevent Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And secondly, if one maybe were to have misfortune of having a stroke, one's recovery might be better because of one's musical education and training. So it's maybe something we could initiate early and encourage people more on a participatory level rather than competitive mastery, because that's what it's like sports. I went to school where sports was very important. So if you weren't super good, then you're sort of thrown by the wayside. But rather, music should be something everybody should be encouraged to participate in, even if they're not very good at it and they can't be, not like you, and they can't be sort of do it at a competitive level.
Right.
But just the sake, for the sake of their health, the mental, emotional, and physical well-being, they should be. And of course, for us, heart health, definitely encouraged to participate musically.
Can I ask Ikeda a question? And that is, Ikeda, do you find, particularly working with young people, that, does music play a role, like with maybe those that you see that are more troubled or how they can cope with what life throws at them? Do you observe that in those that you work with or like in their family units?
I haven't yet. I haven't come across any families that have that distinction between the two. So I'm not sure. But now that I'm thinking back on it, I would probably recommend that, especially to the kids that are feeling a whole lot more stress, a whole lot more anxiety and depression. I think I would definitely recommend some sort of music integration just to get that part of them in, under control. So yeah, absolutely. As far as the ending remarks, I guess the big question is, how can music be integrated into the healthcare settings in order to improve patient outcomes? Like, how can we, I guess, measure the benefits or the advantages of that? So is that something that is possible? I know that I've seen, and I know it's on TV, but like shows where doctors will play music while they're operating. It's probably more for the doctors than the patients, but imagine if that, that music playing in the background does help the patient, even though they're unconscious, and having something played in the background for patients as they come in to kind of, lessen the stress and improve their mood and improve their emotional wellness. So that question right there is I think something that should be worth looking into.
I'd like to actually just comment. This is not the ending remark, but I'd like to actually just add something to what Ikeda has said. I think that I read that as far back, I think it was in 20s or 40s, there were experiments in some US hospitals around playing music for patients and seeing whether that actually could initiate a faster healing or a better healing. So I think that over time, and I've also come across this in the UK setting, in some of the UK hospitals, more contemporary, that we've played around the edges around what music can do in a formalized healthcare setting. And, sometimes we don't pursue things long enough, or we don't put the resources into it to really know, our hospital environments, for whom are they set up? Is it for the faster healing of patients who have to go in? Is it for efficiencies and safety and, the comfort of the medical teams? And of course, that's also very important. But maybe sometimes the balance isn't quite where it needs to be, or at different points of that patient experience. I know when I go into hospitals, or I have been into hospitals, I just want to get out of there. I don't find that there are places that encourage me to feel well, and that encourage me to feel, I know I'm taken care of, or I know the other person is being taken care of well. So I have that aspect. I'm reassured in that. But it doesn't fill me. Again, in the video, he mentioned, an inner peace and maybe I'm in the wrong institutions, I don't know. But I would think that there's a lot we can do, whether it's with music, whether it's with nature, whether it is with light, whether it is with color, whether it is with, paintings, and that we could do to create a setting which is more conducive for everyone's well-being.
It's very interesting. A friend of mine, a colleague, actually had a disabling stroke very suddenly out of the blue. And it may have been related to a spike in blood pressure, but he's actually been discharged from hospital. He's at home. And I spoke with him yesterday, and I'd spoken to him about 2 weeks before. And he'd made a remarkable improvement in terms of his processing and his thinking. And it's a friend of his mother. His mother's a nurse. He's a surgeon. And his mother's a nurse. She had a good friend who suggested music therapy. And he did a full comprehensive rehab program, but that was missing. And I could see the difference over 2 weeks from the effect of just this homegrown grown sort of music therapy, and in terms, it's like night and day. So I recognize that something must have happened there. It may just have been coincidental. Maybe he was getting better but on his own. But it seemed to be that music really made a big difference, and that's been shown to happen in people post-stroke in terms of the rate of recovery. So I think.
And you talk about adjuvants.
Yeah, well, it says music is not necessarily the mainstay, but seems to facilitate other therapies. So on top of physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy, OT, he's getting, music therapy. Mm-hmm. And I think the combined effect seems to have been very good for him. And it's really difficult for him because he's adjusting to being chief of surgery and then becoming a patient. And he said it was a very humbling experience. So I think the music has helped him sort of come to some degree of acceptance from being a strong and powerful surgeon to being, a patient who has to learn to walk again, so that it's been, I think music has been very helpful in that process.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's kind of like a long-winded, not my necessarily closing remarks, but I just wanted to add that in.
Well, I think music is potentially a really powerful therapeutic tool and also a preventive tool. And we may have forgotten how to use it because a lot of the ancients, a lot of the shamans in Native American culture, in the African culture, that music was part of the healing process, and it was part and parcel, wasn't separate. But we do know, for us, for me as a cardiologist, and for us in terms of preventive cardiology, preventing heart disease, that music influences food choices in terms of healthy eating, in terms of physical activity or capacity to exercise is enhanced by the right kind of music, in terms of sleep, disconnecting with every day and settling into sleep music is very helpful for that. In terms of stress reduction, we have Ikeda talking about stress and stress in family, stress in workplace, but there's other things too, community and connection, that contribute to healing and health and heart health, life purpose and meaning, giving us a better understanding of who we are as human beings. And of course, our spirituality, which is also fundamental, important to heart health. So I can see music as a powerful tool we've just not even begun to explore in the context of modern science. We now have the means, we have randomized controlled trials, we have other forms of studies with natural experiments, and we have the science now that can validate a lot of this and give it a firmer footing. So we can begin to remember what we once knew and combine it with a lot of the new knowledge that's very scientific and very procedure oriented and all that. But I think it's music offers a possibility of uniting many aspects of health and medicine.
And I would add to that health does begin with the individual. And until we have those randomized control trials, until we have, the more robust conclusions, until it's institutionalized in our hospitals, in all the other places, we as individuals can make the choice to give more space to music in our lives, whether it is making music, whether it is making it formally in a group, in a choir, in a drumming circle, whether it is experiencing it live. I mean, fortunately now lives are coming back, so we can all give thanks for that and that experience, as well as listening to it. If we have, children, like these lovely experiences that both Edwin and Ikeda spoke of, which they remember so many years later from their childhood. If you are a parent, give this to your children. It doesn't matter if everyone sings out of tune, or it doesn't matter if you all stomp around the living room. It's just a wonderful way to connect with each other, to get off your feet, to move your body, to take yourself out of whatever is going on. Whether it is that you are using it actively to get more physical activity in your life, but as an individual, you can choose to give more space to music. I mean, hopefully this has affirmed its importance in so many dimensions. and to enjoy it. It's such a beautiful expression of to be human and to share humanness with each other, to celebrate it for really the gift that it is to all of us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ikeda, Dr. Edwin, and Katrine, for joining us today on the channel. And, we talked about so many important and interesting topics. And I hope, YouTube, that you got a lot from this video and it makes you kind of think about what role music can play in your life, And so thank you, YouTube, for watching. Please leave a comment in the comment section below and maybe subscribe to the channel. This is the MC's channel, Music at the Core of Everything. I'm Julia, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Now, before we go, I just want to let you know a little bit about who you've been listening to and how to support them. Edwin is a U.S.-Canadian trained cardiologist. Katrine is Chief of Health and Wellness Learning. They are the husband and wife team behind My Heart Wellness, an online program to teach people how to reduce their risk for heart disease and stroke through lifestyle change. Katrine and Edwin provide the guidance and support you need on the journey towards optimal heart health. Ikeda Alston, the founder of KimaCoaching.com, is a Kima parent and family coach rooted in growth. Now, this is the ultimate solution for families who want to build stronger connections, communicate effectively, and work through conflicts in a healthy way. Ikeda's coaching services are designed to help families like yours overcome challenges and build the skills and knowledge needed to maintain a happy and healthy family life. You can find a link to her website in the description. Build those healthy connections with your family and your kids today. As always, thank you for watching the MC's channel, Music at the Core of Everything.